Buenos nachos, amigos, and welcome to Record Breakers, a music podcast where the group of friends gather together to talk about music, an album at a time, each taking their turns, respectfully picking their own albums and sharing it with the group, and we all share our thoughts, and it's fun. I'm Petey Rave, and I've mostly chased the dragon. Not really, no, I don't chase the dragons. Here with me is my team, my squad, my crew, my quorum, my posse. We've got David.
Is anybody out there watching Infinity Train? It's pretty good.
We've got Drew.
Every week this happens, and you're going over your beginning intro bit, and in the back of my head, I'm trying to think of something funny to say, and then I give up because I'm not that funny, and then I just say hi.
Yes. That never stops me.
Never stops me either. And it never stops our guest, the one, the only, still with us, Ash, aka Shu-Chan, Snooshalopoulos.
Mina, Johnny!
I'm totally calling you Snooshalopoulos from now on.
Yes.
Snooshalopoulos.
She's Greek.
It's such a long name, though.
Yeah. We're here to talk about music, of course. We're talking about an album. The provider of the album is Drew this week. Drew, what have you got for us this week?
Well, I decided since we had a couple of new people who may not have heard this band before, I brought their album Day Job in before, but I decided to go with something a little bit out of left field with them. Something that has a little bit more of the disco pop sound that they sort of had in the middle of their careers. It's a band that I adore. Took some time out from their time playing at Disneyland in California to make an album. This is Suburban Legends with their album. Fuck, what's the name of this album?
Let's Be Friends and Slay the Dragon Together.
Slay the Dragon Together. I always, all I know it has is Slay the Dragon. Yes, Let's Be Friends and Slay the Dragon Together.
How come it's not one of their tracks, though? That makes me sad. Like, Slay the Dragon Together? Because it says Let's Be Friends.
Right, so Let's Be Friends is the first track and the title track. Brian Clem, who also pushed for Villain, which is a song I'll go into earlier, pushed to have and Slay the Dragon Together, because the dude's a giant nerd. Spoiler alert for Villain.
Exactly.
I guess.
He thought it would be funny.
Get a lot of nerdy stuff out of it, I guess.
But yeah.
It was just that one song.
It literally was the one song. Bummer.
Just that one song.
Also, Natasha apparently is about his cat.
Yes.
We'll get into the tracks a little bit later. Let's talk about the album musically. Let's talk about expectations first. No, let's talk about expectations. David, what were your expectations coming into this album?
Every time you ask me that question, Petey Rave, I try and struggle to come up with a prose regarding my expectations every time I do the Record Breakers podcast with you fine folks. And I just realize I really come into almost everything like a blank slate. And this was no different. I make no assumptions at all.
Snoosh. What were your expectations coming into this album?
Honestly, I really wasn't sure. I mean, I know Drew likes ska, and I was like, maybe it's ska, and that's about it.
Yes. Obviously, I was here when we first talked about Suburban Legends, and I was looking forward to it because I do remember thinking well of Day Job, so I was looking forward to listening to this album. Let's talk about this album musically. Drew, how would you describe this album musically? What would be the themes, elements that stand out?
So, to me, the thing about Suburban Legends is, depending on where you go in their history, their sound changes quite a bit, but never for the worse, in my opinion. Now, this is coming off of sort of the a lot of the Dance Like Nobody's Watching sort of era. And that era was defined by a lot of like disco and like disco, pop, funk sort of melodies to the underlying sound. They never strayed super, super far from ska. I think Dance Like Nobody's Watching is probably the farthest. But this got a little bit more back to the ska sound they were known for, but still with a lot of like that disco element. The thing about this is there's no Disney covers on this one, like Day Jobs was. So sorry, guys, about that. But because of that, you're getting a lot of weird influence. There's bits of, like I said, disco influence. A lot of them were fans of Oingo Boingo, who I've brought up before. But also bands like Motley Crue is an influence that they will point to. As you might be able to tell from the album cover, Brian Clem, especially their guitar player, was a little bit of a fan of glam rock for its sort of tongue-in-cheek nature at times and its sort of weird milieu that it plays in. And this, I think, plays in that a lot as well. You get the joke at the beginning, right? The Let's Be Friends and Slay the Dragon together. The Let's Be Friends and some of the songs therein are kind of self-deprecating humor of trying to be cool and get the girl and then failing because you're not cool at all. And that bit, you have autobiographical stuff as well as far as the lyrics go. But it is all underlying this very well thought out, very hook centric ska sound that has a lot of like disco pop influence and stuff like that, which becomes a very fun dance heavy record that I think goes down pretty easy from back to front. I think that the weird thing about this album from them is that there are other albums by them where I have songs that are more like my favorites when I go to Suburban Legends, but I think this song is more consistent than those, where there might be a song or two that I skip on those other records. This one doesn't have really any I skip. It keeps it consistent, at least minimum 7 the entire way for me.
Mm-hmm. David, how would you describe this album musically? What would be the themes and elements that stand out?
I would describe this as a group of musicians who get together and want to put together something carefree and fun for all listeners. I recently brought on Threshold Hypothetical, and this is the complete opposite of that in the most complimentary way. It is not exactly poetic or profound, but it is very enjoyable. It's very upbeat. It's very fun. And overall, these guys, they sound like a funk and pop band masquerading as a ska band. That was the biggest thing I got from them, is that the flashes of ska were there almost for the sake of kind of having a token brass section, whereas more of the funk and pop elements felt a lot more natural and organic. Or I don't know, maybe I just like funk more than ska. I don't know. But overall, it was just a enjoyable album from start to finish.
Mm-hmm. Snoosh, how would you describe this album musically?
It's kind of like echoing David's explanation, because like I was expecting ska and I'm like, this doesn't sound like ska. It sounds kind of poppy. Poppy. Not that poppy. A little bit of a pop.
Poppy.
It doesn't sound like that poppy.
It doesn't sound like poppy. No, but I had like the pop feel for a bit, so it kind of felt like something I'd hear on the radio. But then there's a couple songs on there that had like a real disco feel, and I'm like, I'm digging it. I feel it. I don't know what you're saying, but I dig it. If you listen to my last 2 episodes, I don't pay attention to the words.
So far on the Record Breakers podcast, in the 5 years of its existence, I am the only person that has ever read a lyric, ever.
Although I did open up
hold on.
Genius at some point.
I love lyrics. Go back and we can have when we talk about Death Cab a while
English
back.
lyrics. English lyrics.
I'm
Fair
talking about
enough.
Death Cab with Ben Gibbard. Go back and listen to the Death Cab album podcast.
But yeah,
the
but
driver.
I got a disco feel. It feels like a really like. It just sounds like a fun album that anyone could get into, as in not even like an intro. It's just like you throw it on. It's like, oh, that sounds like fun, and then you throw it as part of like a whole playlist of songs, and so everyone's having a good time. Although when we get to the individual songs later, I have one that's just like weird.
This is definitely constructed as a feel good album. It has a lot of like pop influences, a lot of 80s influences, and has those ska tinges throughout. There's something about it that I think when I was actively listening to it had a hard time winning me over for some reason. I think that the elements were all there, but for some reason it didn't like line up. Like my orbs and its orbs weren't lining up to clink into the puzzle that opened the door or whatever. I think overall it's a fantastic. All the parts are fantastic, and there's some cool songs in there. I just wish I wish it won me over a little bit more. I wish I loved it more. But I can't quite explain it. Which is, I know, kind of like a cop out explanation, but it's the best I can come up with. But let's talk about some of those key tracks. Drew, what would be some of the key tracks for you?
Well, to me, it starts out, like I said, the title track, or what was originally the quote title track, "Let's Be Friends." It's a tongue-in-cheek lyrically with guitar power chords, firm power stance, like just riding those, and get you to sort of the idea you're getting at very quick. And then Fire I loved because it was a bit more like chilling. It had a weird like 60s 70s like horror vibe to it, as far as like the music goes, which I think is really cool. Like that B horror sound from that era was really, really dope. And then to me, Villain is also a great song. That's the one I kept pointing to with the nerdness of it, being a thinly veiled Batman's reference that Brian Clem like forced onto this record almost. Like you hear stories from them, and he was a big proponent of like, nah, like let's do like something that isn't just a hokey half love song or a breakup song like everyone else is doing, or something autobiographical. Let's like do something weird,
like all the rest of the songs.
Right. Not saying the other songs aren't weird, but having the little Killing Joke reference in the middle of the chorus, I think is great. And overall, it was like, I will always be good with a song that can make a reference and not be shouting, "Hey, look at me, I'm making a reference." I'm always cool with that, especially in this style of music. And getting down to business as well, if we want to talk about tongue-in-cheek songs, is another one that was like, you're going for the joke, and I appreciate it.
They went for the joke.
Yes.
They went for the joke.
Yep. They went for the joke, all right.
They went for the joke. They certainly did.
David, what would be some of the key tracks for you?
All right. Well, I have to say, Drew, the first track on the album, I can't really agree, because I felt like the opening track on this album didn't really set the tone for a lot of what I heard on this album. I felt like that track and the final track, actually, Don't Want to Wait, were very, very different from what I got from this album. But since I mentioned Don't Want to Wait, the final track, that one had that very put your lighters / phones up during the concert vibe, or as I've said in the past, the end of the romantic comedy movie vibe. Not a bad thing, but it definitely had that vibe.
On every record, I think they always do one like ballad that is the cheesy ballad, and Don't Want to Wait is that cheesy ballad on this one for sure.
I'm gonna knock off a point for Getting Down to Business. I'm knocking off a point for that one because we already have It's Business Time by Flight of the Conchords. They did this one better. They did that better. Also, the two songs that really made me think, wait, these guys are not a ska band. They're definitely not a punk band. These guys are a funk band. They're not ska. Were Polyester and Unbelievable. Those were the songs that really stood out to me the most. That felt like this is what these guys are most natural at. This is, for the lack of a better term, they really found their groove with their funkier tracks. And I think that's kind of where they were at their best. I'd be more interested in hearing the Shake What Your Mama Gave You period from these guys. I definitely would be. Also, what I believe was the second track on the album, Girls Got What I Want. And what I wrote for my notes is, Girls Got What I Want is literally a David Lee Roth Van Halen song with a ska break instead of an Eddie Van Halen guitar solo. It's got a ska break.
Yeah, that's fair.
That makes sense. Ash.
Not a bad thing. Not saying that as a bad thing, just the observation.
Yes.
Just pointing it out. Yes.
What will be some of the key tracks?
So, of the tracks that I had in my list, that I noticed, that I remembered to write down, that I had an opinion. Polyester. I totally agree. Has like the best kind of disco funkiness to it. That's like, I listen like, man, this is great. I'm liking it. You know, I'm feeling it. I don't know what they're saying, but you know, I got it. Like that was like the big one. Fire was fun. It was actually kind of like a fun sing-along moment because it's like, it's the only word you remember. So like when you're at a concert, like fire, fire.
Yep.
So it's like, it's one of those moments where you're like together.
Fire.
Hey, having seen these guys like 7 times, you're not wrong.
Exactly. It's like, fire, fire. It's like every other one. The really weird one, the really weird track I found was Getting Down to Business. I'm like, this has a really big country feel to it. I don't know if you guys agree. Like in retrospect to it, like
I can see what you're talking about.
I can get that. Yeah, for
picking
sure.
up what I put down. Yeah, because like I just started reading the lyrics. I'm like, wow, okay, definitely not country, but it's really got that like tone that it should be country.
Well,
it's not a Heartland song, that's for sure.
Not country.
And I don't know what kind of country.
Doesn't sing about mama or trucks or getting drunk or prison.
It sings about banging though, and there's a lot of banging songs.
Yeah,
in
sure.
pop country, so whatever. And then the last but not
like Old Town Road.
Jeans.
Oh.
And last but not least, Natasha, which is about someone's cat. Whose cat was it? Let me read it again. Brian Clemens' cat. Mm-hmm. And I thought that was kind of sweet.
Yeah.
You only hear it like on the Spotify one. If you got the album somewhere else, you may not get Natasha, I guess, because it's a hidden track.
Yeah.
I tried looking up the lyrics for it just so I could see what they were saying, but it's not even on like Genius. So
and if you're not on Genius, then you're not anywhere.
Then you don't exist.
Exactly.
No, don't. You are completely hidden, even though Spotify has you. No,
but Miss Bad Enough aside, I would say I too enjoy Polyester, the band, not the material. The material is a little itchy, but the band is good. I mean, the song is good, and it works well. It has a nice funky feel. But let's talk about some conclusive thoughts. Bring it back around the horn. Talk about some conclusive thoughts. David, what would be your conclusion on this album as a whole?
This is a fun, carefree album from a bunch of dudes who are out to play some fun songs and have a good time and hope you do as well. And that is perfectly okay with me. And every song on this album had its own little dynamic to it, which I really, really appreciated. Every track had its own little sproing. Shout out to Brad Hibbard. And that's really, really cool to me. It really didn't stay within one genre. And I love that with anything. And they have something on this album that brings it all together. And I think this was really, really good. I guess my biggest gripe, and here's where I'm nitpicking, the mix, the production, guitars were a little low. That'd be my one big thing. Guitars in the mix were a little low, and always hearing organ was nice. I'm always a fan of hearing Hammond organs, so that'd be sound-wise nitpicking, grasping at straws.
Mm-hmm. Ash, what would be your conclusion on this album?
I kind of stated it earlier already, but just to recap, it's it's a fun song that you can just kind of you include it as part of your party mix. And it's a good time that everyone could probably if the only time someone would hate this album would be if they're super what's the word? Jaded?
Miserable.
That too.
Yes.
If they're not happy people, they may not like this album. But you know what? For most part,
this
I think
album
everyone
caught me on a good day, folks. It caught me on a good day.
Yes.
Yeah, that's kind of where I'm at with it.
Yeah. I will say that ultimately I like this album, and I think it's well made and it's really good. I wish I liked it more, but I did think it was a good album, and it has great energy, and it is a fun album, and I would definitely think people should check it out. This out and Day Job, like we talked about previously, both good albums. I will say I liked Day Job more. But obviously we already talked about it, so now we talk about this album.
Day Job is a bit more back. Day Job, and then after that, I think Forever in the Friend Zone are the two that get more back to the ska thing, and a little bit less of the disco funk. Although they will always touch a little bit on that when they feel like it, which is good.
Yeah. So yeah, I think it's a good album, and I definitely think people should check it out. Drew, finally, what is your conclusion on this album?
Usually, and this is going to be weird, but usually when I think of the music playing at a theme park, it's stuff that isn't that well thought out. And as I said with Day Job, these guys, their day job is to go back to Disneyland and play in a theme park. They're living the dream like very few have, and I think part of that is because, as I said, I've been to their shows like 7 or 8 times now, and whether they're playing with they're headlining, or it's the Aquabats, or it's Real Big Fish, or it's Mustard Plug, whoever they're with, to me they always have they look like they're having the most fun on stage of anybody. It really does feel like, and having talked with a few of them, they got lucky to where they had some musicianships back in the early aughts, and that sort of led them to the group that they've sort of solidified now, and they really do have a lot of fun, and I think it shows. And I think that's when ska in general is at its best, is doing two things. One, modern ska is at its best when it's doing two things. One, it's mixing cool things into it, so you get ska soul or ska R&B, or like the ska funk stuff, or you can tell the people are in it to have a good time and make you smile and make you dance. And I never fail at a Suburban Legends show to be out of breath every time. And every album makes me want... Every album, you can feel that coming through the speakers, in my opinion. So that's why I will always go back to them as one of my go-to ska bands. When somebody's like, give me a slice of ska, these guys, I think, are doing a great job of it.
Yeah. Those are our thoughts on Suburban Legends. Let's be friends and slay the dragon together. now we get to the main event of the evening. We get to our haiku reviews. The moment we've all been waiting for and planning for.
And prepping for well ahead of time and in advance.
Exactly. I have a notebook for it and everything.
I have a notepad.
Proud of you, Ash. I'm so proud.
Let's get down to it. Let's get down to the nitty gritty. Haiku
Let's get down to business.
It's business time.
Yeah.
The puns.
It's secret time. David, what is your haiku?
Fun and carefree ska with some legit good funk parts. It's crowd surfable.
Mm-hmm. Ash, what is your haiku?
A feel-good time album, disco and guitar and ska. Oh my, try this out.
Mm-hmm. Mine. Ska-tinged pop music with plenty of energy. Just didn't hook me. And then Drew, what is your haiku?
Some great Cali ska, a little dash of disco, and some fun dance grooves.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Go check out Suburban Legends, Let's Be Friends, and Slay the Dragon together. Not dragons. If there's dragons, we're all screwed at this point. There's a singular dragon. You can of course find it on a Spotify playlist. Play Record Breakers, the home game. Do your due diligence and your due diligence. Do your homework. On that Spotify playlist will be next week's record. And it's finally Snoosh's turn. Next week will be provided by Ash. Ash, what do you have for us next week?
I decided to go with the oldie but a goodie for me. It's called All Too Human by Uncle Skeleton.
Mm-hmm. Fascinating album.
I'm looking forward to boning up on this one.
Mm-hmm.
It's also super long, y'all, so give it some time.
It has a lot of tracks. It's only about an hour long.
They're all really short. There's technically like 4 movements, so just keep that in mind.
I've had a couple of difficult movements in my day. But that'll
Some
be
fiber
next week.
eating. So get some of those fiber tablets in your diet. Psyllium fiber.
And yoga.
But that'll be next week, and this is this week. And you can of course find us all over the internet. David is at Call Me DJM. Drew is at XDruciferX. Ash is at ArtSchu, ARTSCHU. I'm at PD Rave. The show's at 4 Record Breakers. 4 Record Breakers. That's the number 4 Record Breakers. RecordBreakersPodcast.com. RecordBreakersPodcast@gmail.com. If you want to email us, give us some feedback. Rebelly.net for listen to the shows. Rebelly TV on YouTube.
Give PD Rave the 5 stars in Apple Podcasts.
Yes, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher,
and Apple Pie.
Yes, Spotify, SoundCloud. We're everywhere you can subscribe to podcasts. Like, share, subscribe. Do all the things. Until next time, hasta los huevos.
Toodaloo, cool cats and cuties.